Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ahsan, and I'm so excited to moderate this very special Q&A for the film I'd Rather Be Dead Than Silent, directed by Tina Mascara, featuring our beloved Grace Song and Dr. Khaled Abou Fadl. I hope you've seen the film, and if you haven't, your access will expire on the evening of March 27th. For those who haven't seen the film, very quick synopsis. The film follows Grace and the Sheikh as America's at a inflection point, beginning with the rise of Trump, but it zooms out and tells a much longer story of Islamophobia and Wahhabism, while being an extraordinary, intimate portrait of this couple taking on the mission of rightfully claiming Islam's humanistic values and proclaiming a way forward through hate and ignorance. With that said, I'd love to just get started and just jump right in. I want to welcome Tina, Grace, and the Sheikh. We'll be taking questions from the comment stream. Folks can also raise their hands. And we have a few questions pre-submitted via the Google form. So I'll be integrating those streams with the help of Jamie, who's working the tech for us. But I'd love to begin by opening up the floor to just reactions to the film. Um, what did you think? Were there specific moments that struck you? Anything you'd like to offer? Tina's been working on the film for years, and this is an exciting opportunity for her to hear how the film landed. We're an intimate group. We could probably just if you just want to unmute and speak, that'll work.
And we're all among friends, so we all know you. So don't be shy.
Assalamu alaikum. I'll do a start. Um, by the way, Tina, it's a great movie. Uh, Great effort. I believe like you did it for years for this movie to come out, and overall, really great capture of everything what Usuli, portrays. And uh, yeah, I just wanted to understand like how right now it's the viewings that are going on. When will it be out fully for everyone to watch? Um, yeah, that would be my question.
Um, this is the beginning, and hopefully we will have, distribution going forward. But it's about spreading the word and, talking about it and people seeing it, and hopefully, it'll build into like something like a major event, a major people will be able to see it. Right now it doesn't have a specific distribution. But I believe it will. It just needs some time.
Yeah, any reactions or feelings about watching the film? One thing that, I've had the privilege of seeing it a few times at this point, and what always stuns me is just how much is covered in the film. We start with the campus watch and all the stuff on campus, and then we move into Grace's, beautiful conversion story, and we're getting a day in the life, and then we're just this operatic sort of landscape of telling the entire story of colonialism in the Hijaz, and we end, with torture and assassination and looking forward. So it has such a broad sweep, and that always both of the minutia and then also of these grand sort of notes of and currents of what's going on, and strikes me as particularly resonant still today.
So beautiful because it's truly Tina's credit, right? She was the one who created that whole broad sweep and was able to capture everything from the detail to the broad strokes because I think Tina went from zero to 1,000. Like she didn't know any of that at the beginning of the film. and then to be able to master it and put it into a film and make it a story that is engaging and, you know, educational and personal. It's truly just a testament to Tina and Guido's brilliance, but really Tina, because she took the whole project and brought it past the finish line. And at that time, you know, it really, like, Asuli had not even started yet. Like the scene where Sheikh is talking on the phone to a lawyer about this case towards the end. I was sitting and working on the computer, and I was literally building the Asuli website. So it's like nothing had happened yet. So it's interesting to you know, see some of those things um, now, so many years after the fact, right? It's almost 10 years now from the time we started filming. Um, and gosh, you know, how much has happened. And then even just the stunning realization that that whole library, that whole life is just only lives in that film now. Like none of that exists there anymore, which is sentimental to see.
Tina, can you speak to the challenge of organizing the material into something that feels like a movie?
I don't know. My process is kind of crazy. I transcribe everything myself. Um, so if I can't take in everything at the time when I'm interviewing someone or I'm filming it, I have the chance later to just take it in. And then I just, I start with an image and I try to build from there. But, what's really challenging about this type of filmmaking is there's no third, there's no narrator, there's no, so it's like Professor and Grace really telling the story, and I sort of follow that. And I'm somebody that I can get into the weeds and detail. For me, if I don't understand it, then I feel my audience doesn't understand it. So I'm always very thorough about if I don't understand, then nobody will understand. So I have to make them understand because I'm it goes through my filter of what I think, um, how much information a person needs to sort of digest and to, embrace just, the world I'm creating. Um, so it starts like that, with this film, it was hard to know where it was going because it wasn't like I was working toward an event at the end, something happens at the end and it's all building toward that, that moment. With this, it was just more it's a very personal, story that I think is, for me, what's interesting is you learn about this world through the characters. And, and luckily we had that moment at the end where the professor was part of that lecture with, sorry to say, Noam Chomsky, who's now a little disgraced, and Chris Hedges. And so I guess, at the end we sort of tie it together. I mean, I thought that was really impactful to sort of bring the whole thing together. Everything that was said in that lecture sort of embodies everything that happens in the film. Um,
Yeah, I think the final note talking about the Arab Spring, that's really the thing that leads us to the current moment, the suppression of the Arab Spring leading us to this just disaster in the Muslim world right now. So and it has that emotional climactic feel. I think primarily because of how passionately the Sheikh talked about that material. So it yeah, it's a great climax.
it's like what he's saying, and then you see it, the people, what they're saying, it's like nothing has changed really, it's like the aspirations of the people. Uh, it still lives there. And I think everything that was said in the film is still true today, you know? And yeah.
You know, uh, yeah, I have to admit first, I haven't seen the film yet, um, because you,
Not the
you
final version.
you know how hard it is for me to see myself on camera, but but it's remarkable that we have been involved in a long, largely meaningless war. We called it the war against terrorism, something extremely vague and nebulous. No one really knows what that really means. Um, it's extremely vague to incorporate anything. Um, where we slaughtered well over 1 million people in Iraq and Afghanistan. We refuse to take any accounting of how many people we've actually slaughtered because we've blocked the International Criminal Court from investigating US or British or Australian or New Zealand war crimes committed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Then this is followed with the entire world watching a genocide unfold against Gaza, where we are starving, murdering, slaughtering 2 million people before the entire world. Then now we are killing hundreds, if not thousands, of people in Iran. The constant theme in this, the unmistakable constant theme, is the perpetual, seemingly never-ending murder of Muslims. It's as if Muslims are, I've called this before narco politics. It's narco politics because it's the politics of the dead. You are murdering people, and the reason that you can murder them so easily and life keeps going on, the markets keep functioning, the companies keep working, the oil keeps pumping, is because they're in your psyche, they're already dead. You are not killing someone who's alive, you're killing people who are already in your psyche, are dead. And Muslims, especially in the current historical moment, Muslims occupy this position. And what is truly remarkable is that this can go on. We can murder, and I'm talking, you know, estimates are unknown. Some estimates vary from 1 million to several million in Iraq and Afghanistan and Gaza and Iran. And we can know the entire world which witnessed the genocide against the Rohingyas, largely did absolutely nothing about it. The entire world which witnesses the genocide against the Uyghurs, and again, the world does nothing about it. China has not paid any price. So the consistent theme, the entire world witnesses human rights violations regularly committed in Kashmir by India against Muslims. And again, the status of India as a trade partner is never affected by. So the consistent category of slaughter are Muslims. And yet, the question that some have in watching a documentary like this is, why shouldn't I hate Muslims? This is an incredible racial category. What is going on is Muslims in Western history were always the Saracens, the Moors, the Turks, they were always seen as the outsider with certain attributes that are racialized as sort of the crazy, barbaric, insane people. And we continue to slaughter this category of people. And the question is, well, why shouldn't I kill you? Because I fear you. And instead of and so I'm really struck by the fact, Tina, that the no one has picked up the film. in light of the fact that we are a murdering state, we are a civilization. We, I mean, white people.
I agree.
You know, we are in a consistent slaughter state where we're constantly slaughtering Muslims. How could how could this be reconciled with a documentary like this? Not, you know, a documentary on Buddhists or Hindus or Zen something will be picked up. It blows my mind. It really, you know, after all these years, you know, my last visit to LA is the last step before retirement. I retire at the end of the semester, and I feel like I'm retiring professionally, not making sense of the Western obliviousness towards Muslim life, and leave alone Muslim culture, and leave alone Muslim history, and leave alone Muslim achievements. But it is truly profoundly disturbing.
I feel that 100%. I'm with you. I can't tell you the frustration I felt with this film because for me, you know, it's a personal story, but it carries so much meaning, you know, and there are these films that deal with very topical things, and it's kind of the things you see in the media, and so there's a lot of validity to watching those kinds of films, like even what's going on in the world, cameramen get there and they film these very compelling stories. This, it's different in that, it's more of, a profile of two individuals who have this enormous courage to walk and talk the talk. And I just think it's so relevant to people, like a light bulb going off and people saying, they are human, they are people. So for me, it's just been really frustrating, the blindness. And I just wonder where I failed sometimes, or why, it's, for me, anyway, I have to believe that, these forums are important, to spreading the word and, getting the film recognized, and for people to seeing it. So, but Professor, I hear your frustration.
It's just it's amazing because as we go on with our structured life, you know, a little bit of a bad weather and disrupts flights in Chicago, and you can see the visible trauma in society and people saying, you know, why is our lives disrupted? Or, you know, rise in gas prices, and people are saying why our lives are disrupted, and it doesn't really sink in. How about the type of disruption that Muslims in Gaza or Muslims in Iran or Muslims all over the Middle East now that are experiencing, you know, as Muslims?
Lebanon.
Yeah, it just this level of selfishness requires a deep introspection into the the racial white psyche. You know, what is it about white people and their relationship to Muslims in particular that allows them to dehumanize a major part of the world in this fashion? And the pretense, it's like I told the CNN reporter recently, you know, she was telling me, oh, all these politicians in Texas are running on anti-Sharia bills. That they're all every candidate has embraced that one of the reasons that they're running for office is to resist Sharia, spread of Sharia. And I said, well, that's really nice because if you know, I have been studying Sharia 30 years and I still haven't scratched the surface of what Sharia is. Apparently they know. I mean, it would be nice if they could educate me on on what the heck is Sharia, because it's a very complicated question in my mind. And then I was telling, so she was, she got into, maybe what they mean by anti-Sharia is that they want to protect Texas from terrorism. And, again, that it's like the boogeyman, that term, uh, terrorism. It's nebulous, it's all over the place. What specifically do you have in mind when you talk about terrorism? Are you talking about Hezbollah trying to prevent Israel from occupying southern Lebanon, and Israel announcing openly that they want to occupy southern Lebanon up to the Litani River, and Hezbollah saying, no, we're going to fight you? Is that what you have in mind? Or are you talking about some crazy guy losing his mind and taking his gun and going shooting some innocent people, and getting killed in the process? What is it exactly that symbolically Sharia occupies in your mind that connotes a bundle of fears? And what are these fears? And where do they come from? And why do you assume that a a people that follow one of the world's major religions, the religion of Abraham and Jesus and Moses and Muhammad, are prone to terrorize you just irrationally? So it's just I was hoping that I would be in for a bit of a surprise, that when I see a better reception of this documentary. But I have to say, I mean, the reception is just affirmed. It affirmed precisely why this documentary is so necessary, but at the same time, it proved to be a world of frustration.
I want to raise a point that Sheikh, you mentioned in our last Q&A, and something that Shayan also articulated in one of his khutbahs, which is that the feature of Islamophobia is that although people of all ideologies and faiths commit ugly acts, Islamophobes they testify that the ugliness is constitutional to Islam. It is essential to Islam. So the ugliness has this stickiness. And when you think about, even people, 150 schoolgirls killed on the first day of bombing in Iran, and people can't get it out of their mouth, any sympathy, without saying, well, I hate the regime, but. And it really seems that ugliness is the lens through which Muslim lives are viewed, first of all. And then the other point I want to offer is from Edward Said's Covering Islam, which came out in the 80s, and it was a look at how the media covers issues in the Muslim world, and in particular the Islamic Revolution. And he talked about, in particular, the complete lack of curiosity with which American press looked at what was it was a public discourse about what the future of this country is going to be, with many, 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 many sides. And in fact, ironically, it was America's focus, or picking up on Ayatollah Khomeini, that kind of launched him, because, that raised his popularity. Because of course, why would you want someone that why wouldn't you want someone who opposes America to be, your next leader? But this fundamental lack of curiosity, and he even juxtaposed it against the French coverage of the event in Du Monde, which is kind of their world looking journalism, and how they had way more curiosity in how they covered it. But America's lens was basically like, is this going to be dangerous to us or not? And the answer was already predetermined as yes.
I'm always struck by history, because it's remarkable how history seems to seep into the genes. And there's Islam was first seen by Europe as some type of heresy, that some type of as a heretical um what is the word I'm looking for? As sort of a Christian heresy in itself. Like that basically the assumption was Muhammad basically stole everything from Christians and Jews and spinned it uh, to a doctrine that um, is non-kosher, is not orthodox. And then that sort of lasted for a couple of centuries, and that's the way Europe talked about Muslims. And Muhammad was often referred to as Muhammad the apostate, and as sort of this madman who plagiarized Christian and this was long before the Quran was even translated. And then first Latin translations of the Quran and the complex process of coming into contact with Muslims and realizing that Muslims have a thriving civilization and a civilization that has exceeded the accomplishments and inventions of the West. And then and here where the Christian church played, the Catholic Church played a huge role, because in the 10th century AD, so now 400 years have already passed, um, the Catholic Church and issues an edict that that Muslims are an enemy. You cannot befriend them. You cannot intermarry with them. You cannot trade with them, and that the if you befriend Muslims, then you go to hell. Now, fortunately, history was far more complex because although the Catholic Church issues this edict, which by the way is the same edict that opens the door to the Crusades. It's the first. It launches the first of the Crusades, and it ingrains sort of the notion that Islam is demonic. The whole narrative of the Christian Church at the time was that Muhammad was demonically possessed. Islam is part of an antichrist movement. Islam is going to play a critical role as the soldiers of the Antichrist, eventually with the coming back of Jesus. But then, we have this long history of the Crusades, and then the history of colonialism, and then we get to, the current moment where post-colonialism, Muslim civilization has been completely devastated, and colonial powers are clearly enjoy hegemonic influence, uh, and the traditional notions of Muslims as a threat live in the Western imagination in vague concepts like the caliphate, like what happens if Muslims unite, like what happens if Muslims, Sunni and Shia get together, and so sort of resentment that Muslims control all this oil, that Muslims control certain natural resources, a resentment that is sort of we need you, but we hate the fact that we need you. But here's the truly the thing I want to say. In dealing, now 30 years I've been teaching Sharia and dealing with a lot of journalists and dealing with a lot of politicians. And the thing that strikes me over and over and over is that how very intelligent people, when it comes to Islam, suddenly their thinking becomes so stereotypical that I start feeling that I am speaking to people who are unintelligent. Truly, it's like when it comes to Islam, the sophistication that they exhibit when they think about the US Constitution, or the sophistication that they exhibit when they think about the Jewish tradition, or when they think about the Christian tradition and the difference between a Christian thought post-Reformation and Christian thought after the Renaissance, and so on and so forth. When it comes to Islam, suddenly their brain resorts to categorical thinking that is so flat. And when I ask myself, where do I see this? The honest answer is that is most of us, including myself, when it comes to Native American culture, for instance. That when I come to Native American cultures, my brain has been conditioned to think of Native American, to resist complexity, and to not want to invest myself in complexity, because I've been conditioned for so much of my life to dumb down Native Americans, or to dumb down so much of African culture, for instance, that I want to learn about the complexity in European history. There are tons of books about every aspect of European history. You are rewarded at the university for excelling and showing sophistication and if you know the difference between the German philosophers and the French philosophers and this orientation and that orientation, you are celebrated as a very intelligent person. But this reward system doesn't exist for Africa. It doesn't exist for so many indigenous populations, and it doesn't exist for Muslims. And here is where I say the endemic problem was racism, because it is racial. It is racial. Racism is not about skin color. Racism is about categorizing and stereotyping people. And so, every time you see kids playing cowboy and Indians, and some kid goes, woo, 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 and that's racist, regardless of whether they think whatever they think about skin color, but it's a racist paradigm. So my answer is the lack of curiosity is because of racism. And this racism is in the same way that I have to cleanse my racism when it comes to Native Americans because of all of the influence of Hollywood, the influence of Western education. I have to cleanse my racism when it comes to Africa. But that requires introspection. It requires that I look deep, and it requires that I force my brain to say, no, pay attention to the details. Pay attention to the complexity, because this is they are it is their right to have the complexities of their life understood. But unfortunately, I have been with so many intellectuals. I remember some of the most racist, in this sense, when it comes to Muslims, some of the most racist people I encountered was at Yale Law School. Some of the biggest law professors in the country that theorize about American constitutionalism and Roman law and Jewish law. And I found that when it came to Islam, they were not willing at all to look inwards and say, what is wrong with me? And that's where, and that's, by the way, why we can start up a war with Iran and not take seriously how many Muslims were murdering. It is of no great consequence. Even, one of the questions I've been listening to legal experts talk about reparations, and everyone agrees that there is no way that the United States, leave alone Israel, but the United States will take seriously the idea of reparations for Iran, for the illegal assault that we waged against them, unwarranted, unjustified, or even reparations for Iraq, for invading and occupying the country and not finding any weapons of mass destruction. Or reparations for any Muslim country that we've thoroughly devastated because of the colonial legacy. And why the whole history of reparations and international law, why do certain people get reparations and other people are basically told, just get over it? Yeah, we know you suffered, we know we treated you like garbage, like Palestinians, but just get over it. No reparations, no. And the answer to my mind is very clear. It's racism. It's how seriously do you take the idea of addressing the wrongs you've committed? And when you racialize a people and dehumanize a people, you don't take the idea of addressing wrongs seriously at all. You just think in the same way that, when you read about the relationships of masters and slaves, masters, there's a great deal of scholarship about this. Masters would never expect to redress any wrong they've committed against a slave, including maiming and crippling and blinding, and so every time there would be some litigation or effort at litigation, it took courts a long time before the idea that either indentured servant or a slave can be entitled to any level of compensation for harm suffered. And what is remarkable is that when you read the arguments of masters in response to claims, they're always sort of like, well, we acted in good faith. We were just trying to make profits, and that resulted in an injured, dark-skinned person, and we should be forgiven for that, because not very different from when it comes to injury to a white neighbor. And you that resonates in our jurisprudence, in our legal history. And that speaks volumes, people. I mean, it really does. And so I'm like, one of the things that very educational for me is when people can see a documentary like this and still their question is, well, why, some form of resistance to the idea of hating Muslims. You're disturbing me because you are asking me to complicate my thinking about Muslims, and I don't want to do that. I'll say this and then I'll shut up. Recently I saw yet again. Well, I was at a bookstore in LA called the Iliad. And of course, the Islam section, 90% of it was Islamophobic books. You go to the Christian section, you have serious books. You go to the Jewish section, the serious books. Buddhist section, serious books. Islam section, 90% of it are Islamophobic books. One of the books was called Sharia and Liberty by Andrew Boston. And the entire book, from beginning to end, is telling you how Sharia is structurally sworn to fight liberty in every way. Sharia hates liberty. Sharia is all about defeating human freedom, enslaving human beings, to so on and so forth. So basically, from beginning to end, Sharia is like a fascist ideology that renders human beings slaves, and slaves to nefarious purposes. And so once a Muslim buys into Sharia at any level, it's sort of the nefarious poison of Sharia unfolds, and liberty becomes a sworn enemy. And of course, the entire book, there is not a hint of sophistication about anything. You are, it's an exercise of doctrine for idiots. If your thinking is racist, bigoted, stereotypical, this is the book for you. But remember that now for well over 2 decades, every single month, if not more, a new book like this comes out, constantly drilling in this notion that Muslims are an exception, Muslims are different, Muslims are defective, Muslims are psychotic, Muslims are criminal. And then there's this documentary.
On the note of reception for this documentary, I wanted to share some comments that we've received, of just feedback about the film. And I also want to once again encourage everybody to chime in. This is opportunity for Tina to hear how you felt about the film. And so please, whatever you need to do to get my attention, either just unmute and start speaking or raise your hand. We're all friends here. But I'll read a few different comments that we got. Assalamu alaikum, Tina. This documentary is my first engagement with your work. I may not have so many questions, but I just wanted to say thank you for your work. May Allah reward you immensely. I look forward to watching more of your work. A different comment. I can't think of any questions, but the film was amazing. Thank you. Another comment. I just finished watching, absolutely floored. What a mind and what a beautifully made film. And that's been the response that we've seen from within, the various feedback that we have, where just for folks who don't know, we did a screening here in Chicago via the one church that has really stood with Palestine throughout they call themselves a single issue church, and that's been Palestine. And they're not really interested in talking about anything else over the last 2 or 3 years. And they're in the Chicago adjacent suburb that I live in called Evanston, and we've developed a relationship with them. And so they put on a screening of this film for them and their network of Christian leadership that do ally work for Muslims, and their minds were blown watching this film. They just saw various different ways of it's really the differentiating of this mass that is called Muslims, right? Seeing all the different ways in which there are human beings who follow this faith and follow it beautifully and think beautifully. So I just want to put that into the room. But I want to hold for anybody. Please feel free, speak up, let Tina know how you feel. It doesn't have to be brilliant. Adleep, go ahead.
Yeah, Tina, I just wanted to say I was really just like stunned by like the emotional depth that you created in the documentary. Even if we just kind of like hold aside the content, which in and of itself is pretty mind-blowing. I felt like there were just so many like moments where you felt like there was just so much intimacy as the viewer. You like I don't know how to describe it. I just think that there were so many, like I think as the viewer, you very much feel like there were like moments of isolation, and you can tell that there's like there are these people with a cause, but it's also something that's like lonely. There's like still moments and quiet moments, and then between those moments we cut to scenes of protest or Sheikh going to speak somewhere where it's kind of like the two people in the film emerge out of kind of like their solitude to go forth into the world. And I don't know, there were just so many moments, just quiet moments, like mundane things that Sheikh and Grace are doing. It's just so humanizing, or other moments where Sheikh is talking about his time being detained in Egypt, and I just thought that part was really stunning. I don't know I don't know what kind of brilliant mind it takes to technically execute that, because if you ask me to try to put clips together and make somebody feel the way that you made us feel, I would fail miserably at something like that, because it definitely requires talent and an eye. And so yeah, I just feel like you walk away from it like just feeling a lot of emotion, even if you're somebody who doesn't understand Islam or know anything about anything. If you don't have your if you're not coming with your biases, I just felt like it was really a stunning film where, there's just something curious at the beginning, and then right away you're just kind of submerged into just a very intimate setting with two people, and your mind is opened, and you just feel like you somehow relate to them, even if you have nothing in common with them. It's just felt very human and intimate, and just a lot of emotional depth. And also just like you just kind of get a sense of how it's also isolating and lonely. I think that kind of comes across in the film as well. It's like there's a cause and there isn't much reception to it, and that like we're talking about how we're having trouble, with this film, but I feel like the film itself, it relays that sentiment. It's just built in there. So I don't know. I just thought it was really amazing in so many ways, even if you're just looking at just like the technical aspects of the film itself, let alone the content.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just an incredibly artful film. And I think for many of us as Asuli people watching the film, we're all kind of theological orphans in a way. We're not often we don't share we try to share with people we think might be receptive to the Sheikh's work, but often it's just a no-go. And seeing it from the other end of seeing the seclusion for the isolation seclusion, I everything that was just said, I want a +1, +100. And
I
we
just,
have, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I wanted to give someone else a chance to say something first, but I thank you so much, Andalib, for that comment, and also Ahsan, you too, because for all of, I mean, I want to kind of react to also what Sheikh said, because I always joke, he's sort of half empty and I'm half full. So we create the balance that way. And when you see in the movie, like how I have all these audio cassette tapes that I've recorded, right? And it's because when I met him, it was that same feeling that now so many of you have when you encounter this work. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm a dead person now coming to life. You've offered me oxygen or water when I was like dying of thirst. I mean, that was exactly the same feeling that I had when I met him. And you try to imagine, okay, I was just one person, and I met, Sheikh at that point when he was a graduate student at Princeton. So 30 some odd years ago. And immediately I was just struck with, okay, this is the future. I mean, I just felt it in every aspect of my body. Like, this is the truth. This is what's, going to make the difference. And especially after a year of having been just really, spiritually and emotionally and psychologically and, intellectually oppressed by everything that I encountered at the masjid, right? It was just like, okay, this is not what I thought I signed up for. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, here's like the I don't even know, I don't have words for it other than, oh my God, this is so exciting and I have to do something. And from there, like when you think about, this is the long game, right? And so when I look at what we have achieved, it was a dream for Tina and Guido to come, right? Like, how many times we would watch other people create stupid documentaries, do stupid things. And I knew, like, I was like, why doesn't anyone come make a documentary about the library? Why doesn't, anyone come make a documentary about Khaled Abou Fadl, right? I didn't even really think I was any part of it. I just thought, my whole interest and orientation was, what can I do to get Khaled Abou Fadl's thought out there, because this is what people need to know. And how many times you see stupid imams, stupid comments from your fellow Muslim brethren, and people who get so much more attention and so much play, and then feel frustrated. But look at where we are now. We have a nonprofit, we have people who are finding us around the world. This documentary is like a dream come true. It's a way to open doors to people in, the Christian community in Evanston. I mean, it's just like you don't know, and it's like time and time again we get messages from people. I often say we have no idea the impact we're having until we actually hear from people, and you get these messages from all parts of the world that are just breathtaking. I mean, they just blow your mind. And they're all consistent in that feeling of like we're all alone, right? We all feel like we can't share this smart, critical thinking, humanistic version of Islam because you say something that strikes you as common and normal and beautiful and human, and people go off the deep end. Like, what are you? What are you saying? You're a heretic and all of this. But then you have this opportunity to bring all the people from around the world. Like, to me, these are like seeds that God has planted all around the world, and we're all connected through, Usuli, through this shared thing. So when you think about, all right, we're making progress, and it's little by little. It's gonna be one person at a time, and especially in this moment where, if you think about the last few years, like what a change, like Gaza has brought about, right? And the openness that people are starting to experience because of what they've seen, their hearts are being open, and now you're also at this point where all of us, whether you're Muslim or not, feel completely helpless to the world, because it's like we can't stop World War III from happening. We can't stop our idiot president from, doing all kinds of things to really destroy the world. And I feel like to me, it's like an existential moment where almost you realize the only thing that is going to keep you sane is your faith in God, your anchor in God, and just planting seeds. Because what else can you do? And that's what we're doing. I mean, one person at a time. The fact that I can speak to people I've met through Suli, and we connect on kind of this shared value system, this shared language, this shared understanding of things, is so beautiful. It makes me feel less alone. And then now we actually, when you hear stupid things about, Sharia, actually now you have a place to turn where you know something. You can actually, talk about how Sharia is something very different than what people, consider it is in the mainstream. So I don't know. I personally like the challenge of surprising people, right? Which I think this documentary does very well. Like when you can be normal and, and very pious at the same time. And it's like, it sort of shakes people. Like, I'm sure it was very exciting in Chicago, like that whole humanizing effect. For me, it's extremely gratifying. It's like extremely, like it's just satisfying to shock people that Muslims are not what you think we are. And that's, to me, part of the resistance. And, you know, what we're supposed to do is just keep planting seeds. So I do feel like we've made a lot of progress, and it's exponential, right? The more of these people that we're touching, they're going to touch more people, and it'll grow. And all of this ultimately is in God's hands. So, I'm just, I'm so proud of what Tina and Guido created. I'm proud of everyone that comes and finds something, exciting at Asuli and who carries it forward. Like, everyone is spreading by word of mouth. And I think that's the most powerful testament. Because people have been working really hard on the other side to demonize all of us, and we don't have the money, we don't have the following, but we have God on our side, and you just have to believe. When I think like, okay, Islam was at the height of civilization for 800 years. That's a really long time, and at some point it came crashing down. Well, we're only living, a fraction of that, but everything that we're doing could be planting the seed for the future, for the next 800 years. We just don't know, but it's exciting because I feel it in my bones that this is the message. This is the Islam that can support Islam being at the height of civilization. Like, all the Islam that is mainstream, that's the trash Islam, right? Like, that is not going to support the height of civilization anywhere. I mean, that's like the Islam that makes you shut off your brain and make you hate yourself. And so we're coming forward with something completely different. And to me, that's very exciting.
I want to share a comment that was in the comment thread. I just finished watching and loved it so much. Wow, I want to read everything by Dr. Khaled Abou Fadl now. Thank you so much for making this film. It was wonderful to see the library and the intention behind it too. So much wonderful content in this documentary. Grace, something you were saying just made me think about how there's the inside outside long game here where it's, the broader world's conception of what Islam is coming from largely a place of conditioned ignorance. And then there's the work within our own community. I mentioned us being theological orphans in a lot of ways in the current moment. And related to that, there was a question that was submitted that I want to honor here. It's a bit long, but there's a lot of sincerity in it, so I'm just going to read it. Assalamu alaikum. My question is about hijab. I've worn it for almost 20 years, believing it was obligatory and that I'd be sinning if I removed it. Recently, however, I started feeling tired of being so visible. After watching your teachings on the subject and those of Sitara Akram, my understanding of the matter has changed. Logically, I can see how the hijab isn't necessary, at least for me living in the UK. I do see a future where I no longer wear it, but have not yet taken that step. My question is, with opinions and teachings like yours that open up this discussion beyond what may have been available to me when I researched hijab over 20 years ago, that present the sources to us with full context, why isn't there more open discussion on this? Why aren't these alternative opinions more widely accessible? Why are so many Muslim women wearing this hijab uniform to the point where entire countries will have their women dress in a hijab? If the Quran did not specifically mandate covering the hair, why is the practice so widespread? I think about taking the hijab off, and I can't help but think about how much I will be questioned by so many people about why I've taken it off, because it seems to have become the norm to wear it. Thank you.
Is that for me or for the professor?
I think it was submitted for Sheikh, but if both of you want to speak to it.
I mean, listen, the difference is there's from my perspective, there's a critical jurisprudential issue. But by the way, before I get into this, I just want to say that from my view, Tina deserves an award for this documentary. I mean, I don't know who gives awards, who grants awards, who does what, but I mean, the commitment, the dedication that I saw, the art, she really, I mean, Tina's a quiet person, but uh, if she was a Muslim student, what she did would blow your mind because she accompanied me, literally transcribed everything I said, studied everything I said, mastered everything I said for 2 years. Or, it. Can you imagine if she was a Muslim student? We could have had another faqih on our hand. Uh, so it's. I mean, and maybe Grace is right. Maybe the day will come where people get tired of the politics of necropolitics and start looking at alternatives, and then discover that someone was pioneering something that was just brilliant. But anyway, the thing about the hijab, the question goes back to your conception of what is God's law. What is God's law intended to achieve? What is it that God wants from us and why? And so and how do you, what are the various indicators or the elements to understanding the divine will? So, and one of the big issues is whether history itself and especially historical sociology, is important to understanding the divine will. So let me tell you exactly what I mean by this. So I can study history and I can see that there is a well-established institution throughout human history of male dominance and patriarchy, and that men often would express their frustrations about power by exercising control over women. And now there are a lot of people out there that would say this is not relevant to understanding the divine will. This is entirely irrelevant. Why are you bringing in a perspective about sociology and history? I disagree. I think that everything in knowledge is relevant to my understanding of the divine will. And then I see a historical complexity in the way Muslims understood the text and practiced the text. So I see very conservative practices, for instance, among Turkish Muslims, especially the way they treated the veiling of high-class women as opposed to the unveiling and exposing of low-class women and especially slave girls. I see that there are narratives in history that describe how slave girls practically would go around the market with very little covered. I see that before the modern moment, that there is a historical complexity in the way that Muslims read and understood the text in Africa, and as opposed to Indonesia, as opposed to Malaysia, before the modern moment. And I see that before we arrived at a modern moment, and this is a really important point, that colonialism made one of the biggest issues in dominating Muslims and subjugating Muslims a consistent rhetoric about Muslims oppressing women and claiming that colonialism is there or justified by the liberation of Muslim women. And I also then see that Muslims reacted to this colonial rhetoric, this constant harping on how Muslims subjugate women and that we are there to liberate women and so on. The way they reacted to it was predictable by asserting increasingly conservative counter narratives to try to fight colonialism through symbolic acts of resistance by becoming more conservative, more protective, more insular, and so on. And I then see that all of this is relevant because if I'm trying to read the religious text, I have to understand the complexity of history in how that religious text was read and approached. And then in understanding all these dynamics, then I approach the religious text and I try to see what the text actually says, what it can reveal to me about the divine will. So to answer, why is there such resistance and why is there a you know there are millions and millions and millions of Muslim women who don't cover their hair. And as a jurist, I just cannot simply accept the thesis that all of them are sinners. Just when you see a widespread practice, you have to, it's sort of like an alarm going off to be extra vigilant in studying the text. Because if you're going to declare all these people sinners, that's umum al-balwa is what we call it. That's something that has grave consequences, and you better be very sure. So the burden of proof when you come to a declaration that will make a lot of people sinners is much higher. And why are they so resistant when it comes to the issue of hijab? It is precisely because of the colonial legacy. Because in their mind, the hijab is not about women's rights, it is about resisting colonialism. And the minute you say, let's re-investigate this issue, let's, uh, Grace was telling me that she made a point in the documentary about twins and fitna and so on. Well, part of the fact that you are not open to rational thinking about this, or rational give and take, or rational discourse, is the fact that you feel that by merely opening up this topic, you are betraying a sense of loyalty to Islamic authenticity that has been compromised by colonialism. So it's as if you are feeling that I am giving in to colonialism. The minute I'm saying women, you can show your hair, that somehow this is like I've fallen into the trap that colonialism has set for me. But there is a very serious problem when law is simply a reaction to a foreign influence, a foreign claim. That's the worst type of law. The law that is just passed to spite a foreign power. That is absolutely when law fails, because it's no longer about the interests of the actual practitioners of the law, but it simply becomes about symbolism and sending messages. And I cannot ignore the fact that, yet again, it is the bodies of Muslim women that is being used to write these, to inscribe these messages. So I want to tell colonialism, you came in, you occupied our countries, you took away our natural resources, you destroyed our legal systems, and I want to resist you. So I'm going to resist you by sending you the message on the body of my sister or mother or daughter or so on. That bothers me as a jurist. To me, it's relevant. For most jurists out there, unfortunately, in the current moment, it's irrelevant. They don't want to talk about this. They don't want to even consider it. They want to pretend that they are objective purveyors of the evidence, uninfluenced by this historical legacy. And again, it is exactly like a person who asks themselves, do I have racism within? By studying history, you interrogate the self. And most, unfortunately, Muslim jurists in our post-colonial moment don't want to interrogate the self. They want to believe that, just because since the colonial age, while colonialism were constantly telling Muslim women, leave the home, go out to the workplace, go out partying, go out dancing, have a boyfriend, and all of that. The counter to that was, no, Muslim women cover up and stay at home. That was the counter. And those jurists want to pretend like they're not influenced by these dynamics. But it's disingenuous. Of course, we are all influenced by these dynamics. I myself, sometimes, when I, come encounter a feminist who is anti-Islamic, like, I run into one of these feminists, or what's her name, the woman who passed away in Egypt, I forgot her name. Um, I myself find that I'm like the impulse to respond to her by saying, shut up. No, women in Islam have to cover. Stop. And a lot of times, be honest, I have that reaction when I hear feminists saying, "Oh, Islam's prohibition on fornication and adultery is regressive and nonsense, and Muslim women should be free to sleep with whoever they want." My impulse is to want to clamp down and say, "No, Muslim women should cover up and stay at home," because I hate the colonial message. I hate the westernized message that this feminist is bringing. But I must catch myself and say, is the law about me and my personal feelings or about God's will? See, that's the whole difference. If you catch yourself in that moment and interrogate your understanding and say about your anger at the deconstruction of your tradition by these, from my perspective, very westernized women, uh, that's the thing. And so the resistance to opening this message, or even definitely, definitely goes back to the entire legacy of colonialism. My response to the hijab is like a lot of issues that have to do with modesty. It is context driven. So there are situations you could be in a society where absolutely modesty does require that you cover your hair. But for Muslims, especially, and this is the subtle point for people who hate subtlety. For Muslims in non-Muslim countries, Muslims in the West, the illah, the operative cause for the hijab, and that is the entire operative cause was to create a sense of equality between women, because the practice used to be that uh, free women, high class women cover, and low class women or slave women do not cover. In fact, in some contexts, they were prohibited from covering. And in fact, sometimes it's not just their hair, but also their breasts, that you have to show your hair and your breasts. Islam came and said this discrimination between high class and low class cannot be. That is essential to my understanding of the law. And so it the purposes of the law and the function of the law apply very differently to Muslims who are living in the West than it would to Muslims who are living somewhere where, for instance, if a woman shows her hair, that's an indication that she's a prostitute. Am I going to come to a context like this and say, oh, go ahead and show your hair? In a context that is so different, I might say, no, cover your hair. So the law, God's law is rational. It serves a purpose. And the jurist must understand the purpose. Otherwise, you're going to misapply the law. That's the whole point.
Grace, do you want to respond to that at all?
I mean, I do, I totally understand that feeling of you feel like you're going against the tide, to make this decision about taking off your scarf. You're left feeling very vulnerable because you don't have command of the Islamic legal jurisprudence behind it. You know that you hear everywhere that this is ijma, that every woman needs to cover. Like it's so powerful for us to hear this explanation from Sheikh that, this is a reaction to colonialism. But I think for me, I'm not a jurist. I don't know the jurisprudence. I understand that this is an issue of modesty, protection, that it's not clear from, my own due diligence from studying what Sheikh has put out about hijab, what Sitara Akram has put out about hijab. What we teach, obviously, at Usuli is a very vibrant moral framework, right? It's an ethical lens through which you understand what is it, or you try to investigate what is it that God wants from me in this situation. So for me, as a non-jurist, I mean, like, I believe this kind of comes back to turning inward, developing the self, developing your level of confidence in your faith, your connection with God, right? And so how much, like when I look at how much I personally gained from one, education, right? All of the stuff that we learned, well, I mean, in my whole journey, obviously from reading Sheikh's books, going through Project Illumin, understanding, what what the Quran says, which was that was a complete game changer, is understanding like how is the Quran relevant to us in our time in this moment? Because if the point is you take the timeless moral lessons and then you apply it to your time, your age, your context, what is justice, what is beautiful, what is merciful, what does God really want? And then developing that connection with God. I mean, this is how I reach for myself, what's authentic in Islam. I mean, this is how I can come out with a video that says, here's why I don't wear hijab and here's why I don't think it's a sin, and I get accused all the time, obviously, of, oh, you're just, uncomfortable and you're trying to justify your sin. But no, actually, this comes from, education. It comes from my own personal relationship with God and my own, due diligence and critical thinking about what makes sense, what is modest in my context, what is, applying all of the stuff that I've learned and believing that God ultimately wants us to thrive. Every human being wants us to thrive. And so when you start looking at, women who, many people have written to us about, I feel, I don't want to wear hijab. I can't wear hijab. It makes me feel, anxious. It gives me depression. I mean, it's like, it's so clear this cannot be something that God commanded for every woman, because if this is a message for humanity, then you should be able to make the argument that, okay, well, this is, what God wants for every single woman in every single place and every single time. That's just irrational. It's anti-rational. So, but you can't arrive at this without developing a certain level of confidence in your faith. And, you can't develop confidence in your faith if you haven't done the work to educate yourself and you haven't taken the time to build that trust in God, that God is actually rational and merciful and loving and wants you to thrive, as opposed to what, many people have this conception of God is sort of petty and, ready to judge and ready to punish and ready to, which is the exactly the type of feeling you get in the masjid, right? Like that's when people are ready to jump on you, when all the sisters come and tell you your hair is showing, when, and haram, like you're standing, your lines are not straight and there's too much distance between you and the sister next to you. I mean, this is like oppressive Islam. And yeah, and so I think that you have to, the whole point of religion is it should make you a better person and closer to God and more confident and in your ability to stand up for what's right. That's what I feel like this whole message has taught me through, like what I've learned from Sheikh. And so when I put out a video, like, no, this is in my due diligence, I have a right to my opinion. I have a right to my, determination with the faculties that God gave me. And you have a right to your own as well. I'm just putting out what this is, for anyone that this might help. This is what I have arrived at in my journey. And I put out all of the evidence. I put out all of the, everything, so you can access all of that and come to your own conclusion. I mean, and the problem is that a lot of people don't take the time to do that, or they don't think that they can arrive at the confidence or the connection with God by doing that, for whatever reason. But it's there for people. And to me, that's the point, that for everyone, God wants us to feel that confidence in our faith, that kind of conviction, that kind of love and trust, in God's desire for each of us to thrive. And those are the building blocks. And that's what I think Asuli puts out there for people. And it's just hard to convince people to take that journey, right? Like, this is the most important investment you can make is in your faith. Like, take the journey with Project Illumine, learn the tafsir, it'll change you. Learn the sirah, it will change you. It will, because I've taken that road. When I started on my journey, 40 years ago, I was a broken person. And now I am where I am today, which is completely on the other end of the spectrum. And it's only because of God and what I have learned and experienced along the way, only what I've educated myself through, what I've seen. It's all, what I've been exposed to. And it's miraculous. But I believe that that's what God wants for everyone, is that confidence to say, no, this is what I believe. And if I'm wrong, God knows my intention. I tried my best, and God knows what's in my heart, and God will correct me. That's trusting that, like, when we hear that God loves you 1,000 times more than your own mother, you start thinking about how much you love your children, and you're like, oh my God, God loves me more than that. It's a different understanding of what Islam is supposed to be. And I feel like it's so I feel for her, and I guess I would say, um, do the work to learn and pray for God to strengthen you, and you know don't rush. Take your time, do what feels comfortable, but know that the justification is there. Like, that was the whole point of my putting out that video, is to let people know, there is space, there is room. This is not an open and shut matter. That you are not committing a sin. Like, there is jurisprudence that supports that position. And I think that's what the power of this message too from Asuli. It's about the search, right? It's about the intention, the search, doing your best, and building that relationship with God. So
I think this note about a kind of reactionary conservatism and this interrogation of the self, and looking at these issues from a perspective of understanding yourself and understanding what the conversation really is about. It's so fascinating, and so it touches it. It influences so many different topics. And when we have imperial kind of ideologies that align themselves often with repressive states in our homelands, um, it becomes very confusing to pick a side, and it feels like picking a side. And at the Asuli conferences, I talked to a bunch of people, many women who identify as Western feminists who would not align themselves with what I would call like imperial kind of feminism. People who took on the charge of let's invade Afghanistan to liberate the women when, the liberation comes in the forms of bombs. But it's very interesting how we get kind of backed into a corner. And so often it's the men who get to then make a decision about what women are doing. Grace, there's a question that was pre-submitted for you. Sorry, it's a comment for the Sheikh, but I want to kind of redirect the question to Grace, and I'll explain why. But the comment is, I'm sorry for the inhumanity Sheikh faced at the hands of the Egyptian government. It was heartbreaking to hear your testimony and emotion, but to see and then to see how you channeled that towards justice and equity for others. And now a Tafsir project that has transformed my life forever. I'm grateful to God for your life and your work. May Allah reward you immensely and protect you. Um, Out of respect for, the trauma of that experience, Sheikh, I won't ask you a direct question about that topic, but if you want to add some words here, please feel free to. I wanted to ask Grace, like, what was it like for you hearing the Sheikh talk about that experience?
I mean, it's something that I knew from the time that we met, which is sort of interesting. I hope it's okay that I share this, Sheikh. I think that the first night that Sheikh and I met, we were in Princeton, New Jersey. Um, I mean, I tell the story about how we met at a bookstore and all this, but we spent the first day we met, we spent like 8 hours together, and I had my like free, I could ask as many questions as I want. So this was like, whoa, which didn't continue indefinitely. But you know, that evening, I remember we had dinner together, and the topic came up where Sheikh shared with me that he had been arrested and tortured. Um, and I think that my reaction was, and he told me this after the fact, that, I felt such admiration and such sadness. Um, but to me, it was like something that was very honorable and beautiful. It was almost like, it was a sacrifice that, you made, that, they came after you because you stood for something truthful and beautiful. And I had no idea that this was an experience that, like in maybe the Arab context, is a source of shame for, for society. I know that, oftentimes children are told, in Arab societies, stay out of politics, don't do anything that would put you in harm's way, because they understand that, like these, I mean, he was with a group of his, bookworm friends studying Islamic jurisprudence, right? And they all got arrested um, and we know today of the stories of people that are disappeared and tortured, and it's absolutely horrific. But so I knew it from the very beginning, and to me it was like a badge of honor. And I think that you don't, as a young person, like, I mean, I didn't know exactly what that meant, um, and it was something horrific that no human being can imagine, right? And even like I don't have the constitution to really even spend much time thinking about it because it's devastating. And I would hear little snippets of things that had happened to him, and I would just, it's hard because it just is so traumatizing. And I think um, to hear that that happened to your family member, your husband, it's, you don't really quite know what to do with it. Um, but I think that it's been a journey, right? Like I think that I think people know. I mean, like, early on, Sheikh talking about this in the film was such a huge development, because early, in, like, so we've been together now, almost 30 some odd years. In the beginning, he couldn't really even talk about it. And then time passed, he was able to start talking about it. And then the way he was able to talk about it in this film, you know, I mean, this was a sign of I think, development or growth in a sense, because also you can't separate that experience personally from knowing that this continues to happen to so many Muslims across the world, and even more so now. And with the onset of Gaza and all of the images coming out, from Palestine, of all of these men being tortured, and that was very triggering for Sheikh. Um, and we went through a very difficult period because of that. It brings up a lot of trauma, but it also, I think, allowed us to, at this stage in our life, start concerning ourselves with healing. We've talked about the importance of turning inward, being able to address trauma. And I think that for me personally, like, I wrote about this in my Ramadan reflection, which, Cheyenne shared a story in his about how he recognized at some point, sharing a dinner with, a group of friends, Muslim friends, that every single person in his friend group had been dealing with some kind of parental trauma. They experienced trauma from their Muslim parents in some way, shape, or form. And we've talked about, like, Muslims are the most traumatized people. I mean, for all the different reasons. Um, and they and traumatized, hurt people, right? Traumatized parents raised traumatized kids. And I was certainly in that situation, although not from a Muslim background. But so, and as I've become more, older, I realize how prevalent trauma is, and how much that, in order to achieve this goal of, that if God wants you to thrive and God wants you to be healthy and to heal, that you have to deal with that trauma. You have to turn inward. You cannot pass down this generational inheritance. And this is another piece that I wrote during Ramadan about my son Mido, because I had so much generational racism, classism, materialism, ageism that I got from my parents, and I didn't want to pass that down to my son. And I, it starts making me think about Muslims. So many of us are traumatized, and for us to have a future as a healthy, thriving population, we have to deal with that trauma so we don't pass it on to our children, and we have to somehow emerge from this so that we can pass on something healthy and inspiring and beautiful. It's like so many things have. So I'm kind of going in a long direction, but I feel like, you know everything happens for a reason, right? As Muslims, we have to know that God is in charge, and what God puts before us, whether it's, when it's difficult, there's something to be learned. There's something that, allows us to grow beyond ourselves. And I feel like my own journey, even, knowing what Sheikh has been through, knowing what I've been through, what we've experienced in our 30-year journey together, has allowed me to see how important at so many different levels that this journey towards growth and thriving requires, really hard work, to turn inward, to deal with trauma, to just figure out how to be the best version of yourself, which is ultimately what this religion, what God wants, I believe. you know um so it's all for a reason. It's never easy, but I think if you do the hard work and you lean into God and you ask God, like literally, like, every prayer for me is like, please God, just help me figure out what it is that you want me to do. Help me learn what you want me to learn, help me do what you want me to do. When God is your partner in that journey, then you get directed in the right way. And I think that that's also something really important, that we try to teach at Asuli. It's like that partnership with God, right? That companionship, that constant invitation of, please God, just be with me, help me, guide me. That makes all the difference, regardless of how dark and awful things can become. So, yeah, it's been extremely painful and challenging at times. But I think Allah allows you to see and understand if you really want to get, get to a better place. And so I'm grateful for that. I feel like God has been very instrumental, in helping us navigate a lot of the challenges that have come from that trauma, from, because that's something that, the torture is, I mean, there's just no words. You see snippets of it on social media, everywhere, from Gaza to, you don't even have to see the images. You just hear about the evil that's being committed, and it's, you realize that, there's no, I think there's no way forward out of that without God's help. Um, so yeah, I mean, everything now I just feel is just a constant reminder of trust and surrender, trust and surrender, trust and surrender, because it's like nothing else we can do. It's just like, okay, without God, we're, I mean, I feel so often grateful that I have faith, and, because if I didn't, like, this would be a really horrible time to be alive. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
uh, you know, I don't mind saying that once you go through an experience like this, your life is forever altered. Um, and uh, and I didn't. I mean, part of Guido and Tina's brilliance is that they brought this out, because I would never have imagined that I would talk about it on film. As Grace mentioned, I spent about 20 years. I couldn't even uh, talk about it in any unless I felt very, very, very comfortable with someone and very safe. Um, but in many ways, it shaped my life. I dreamt of being a writer of stories, of novels, and a poet. And that experience gave me a laser sharp focus on wanting so badly to, um, especially in the Muslim world, to save others from having to experience what I experienced. To my to in technical terms, I dedicated myself and my entire life to trying to get torture to be um, a, considered a prohibition against torture to be a preemptory norm in international law, what is known as jus cogens, that it is it is considered by definition a crime against humanity. That was my aspiration. That was my dream, is that torture would just become a crime against humanity. Theologically, committed myself, I dedicated myself to the idea that uh, torture, I mean, we have already hadiths from the Prophet that very strictly prohibits torture and says that God does not accept. There's no justification for torturing human beings, and there's not just hadith, but there are other traditions. Um, uh, but and the hardest thing is, I remember once we had a faculty talk where a professor from Israel um, basically was defending the Israeli Supreme Court's decision that the use of torture against Palestinians is legal. And I remember just being so emotionally triggered by this talk, the defense of torture in as a legal institution. And I had a very intense argument with him. I mean, I don't even say debate, because he got uh, unhinged. Um, and then 9/11 and the use of torture by the US in black sites, and the Dick Cheney's declared policy of allowing, and supported by Bush ultimately, because Bush signed the order allowing for the use of torture, and again against Muslims. And one of my colleagues, his name is Rick Abel, who's retired now on the faculty at UCLA, wrote an amazing 2-volume work about how torture was used exclusively by the United States against Muslims. All the victims of torture since 9/11 have been Muslims, period. And of course, I again saw the clear racial overtones. The reason you could do this to Muslims and get away with it, and relatively no one cares, you know, a very little amount of care, is because again, you thoroughly dehumanize Muslims, that it didn't count. That you could still say we are a democracy, and you could still claim that the United States is the protector of human rights in the world, as you actually practice torture daily. Why? Because you do it against Muslims, so they don't count. It's exactly like Israel says, we're the only democracy in the Middle East, as they every day rape and maim and assault Palestinians and murder Palestinians. Why? Because they don't count. So yes, we're a democracy. Well, but how about your human rights record? Well, it doesn't count because these are Palestinians. These are terrorists, and so it's the same logic. And I mean, I am actually, when I look back, I'm happy that Tina and Guido got me to leave that little, with all my reservations, all the complex feelings about this, um, because now that I am about to retire, and I realized that I basically failed. I failed in getting the prohibition against torture to be a grand norm, or a jus cogens, or a preemptory norm of international law. I failed in getting Muslims to believe that torture is
Torture is
one of the
one of the
greatest.
greatest.
Oh,
Oh,
something.
something's
There's an echo. Uh, uh, One of the gravest sins that you can commit against God, and the fact that all the dreams that we had in the Arab Spring, that we can actually build societies that don't regularly practice torture, because the countries right now throughout the Muslim world, whether you talk about Egypt or Syria or Sudan or Yemen or Saudi Arabia or Jordan, or every single day there are people being tortured. I mean, and now we can even add Pakistan to that after the military latest coup. And that to me is a level of trauma and a level of yeah, trauma that is very difficult to put into words. Nothing is more triggering than the realization that as you wake up and you go about your day and you go to bed, that there are people going through what you know is a living demonic hell. You know, in there, the soldiers used to tell us, you know, if Allah comes down from the heavens to defend you, we throw him in the cell next to you and we electrocute him. Uh, the torturers used to adopt nom de guerre, you know, names of action names of Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl. They used to call themselves these names of the. They used to say, if they caught anyone praying, or if they caught anyone saying, Allah help me, that would be opening the doors of hell. They would start, unleashing abuse on you for just saying, Allah help me, or, mentioning the Prophet. And they would say, oh, if we would torture the Prophet in front of you. People don't understand that the level of demonic reality that goes on. These are, and the fact that we live in societies that, this category, well, they're torturing Islamists, so that somehow makes it okay. And and that we all carry the scars, because most of those who make it to the West are Muslims who haven't gone through that experience, but they live their lives terrified of the possibility of going through that experience. And that ingrains a certain level of cowardness and fear within your psychology that makes it. There was one sermon that I gave where I was talking about how in Canada I met these young, attractive Canadian women, and they had gone on a flotilla to Gaza. And I just really I went up to them and I said, you, that Israeli soldiers sexually assault women that they capture on flotillas. And how did you, I mean, what I wanted to understand that level of bravery. Like, how could you put yourself in a position where you could be sexually assaulted by Israeli soldiers, you could be beaten, you could be killed? And their response was, whatever would happen to us is not nearly as bad as what happens to Palestinians every day. And I know that no Muslim will do what they did because of the role of fear that is embedded in our genes. We are taught to be scared. And that is why, and that holds us back and holds back our achievements as Muslims. We are not as daring. We are not as innovative. We are not as creative. We are not as free. We are constantly looking for safety and shelter. And that plays a role in where the Muslim civilization is. And of course, I wish that I could have done more. I always, that is just a constant feeling with me. I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have. It just to leave this world with torture being so endemic in all over the Muslim world. When we know our Prophet clearly, unequivocally, we want to talk, we get all worked up about the hijab, but we somehow accept the reality of torture in our life. How is that? How could that be?
About that sequence in the film, I just want to say that I think it's treated with such respect and beauty in the film. Tina, I think it was so important for all of us to see, and it's just as with everything in the film, it's just impeccably treated and rendered.
Thanks, Ahsan.
This is why I really think Tina deserves an award. I mean, it just
No, it's my subjects. It's my subjects. I
no,
think
no.
there's like a level of trust.
Art presentation.
Well,
Go ahead.
there was a level of trust with all of us, and I feel that God put me there to witness and to now be able to make this film, and I just do hope that people will be able to see it and get something from it because I think they're very special people. And I have to say, they didn't say edit this out, edit that out. I was able to, as a neutral party, I was able to go in and be witness and get evidence and be able to make the film that I wanted to make about these people. And anyway, it was a great journey.
And we did give you an award at the last conference.
You did. I have the award.
I want to do a quick time check. There's 6 minutes left. Folks want to get in their words, their comments, their feedback. Now's the time to do it. I'm just going to take a minute to talk about next steps for this film. We talk about the reception of this film. It's so important for us as a community to get behind it. So if you think this film and this type of conversation is valuable and needed, we encourage you to join us in building this impact campaign. There's a pinned conversation in the Progressive Islam subreddit. Add your thoughts there. Folks still have time to watch the film until March 27th in the evening. You can host your own screening or suggest to us a group to host the screening. Virtual or in-person options are both available. You can host for $0 by choosing the ticket split option. You can choose the ticket price. You can choose the dates. You can also donate to our impact campaign, help us pay for the rentals and labor that it takes to get this film and these conversations into the world, and know that ticket sales go directly back to the impact campaign. So your $15 ticket for this screening or any screening that you host will go back to putting it on more screens. We obviously want to, most of you are Usuli folks, share and further explore Usuli's work. And Jamie's going to put links to everything that I mentioned in the chat. There it is. Thank you. Comments, more feedback, last parting words you want to say to Tina, Grace, the Sheikh?
You've been an amazing moderator. Thank you so much.
Yes.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
I just want to say I always think about ripple effects. Like, it's something might seem small now, and then there's, there might be some effect that you are not aware of that causes something 60 years from now that you wouldn't have expected, or, like I just think there's value in having some stealth tactics. My cousin, she's from Pakistan. She came over to the U.S. like a few years back. Very from Pakistan, but has an interest in faith, but kind of like sees things that are not so savory. And we were just having a conversation, and she was like, "Well, who do you learn from?" I was like, "Well, let me tell you." Like, I have a copy here of the Prophet's Pulpit if you're interested. She was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And I just saw her, for Eid, and she's like, "I'm 6 khutbahs in, and I love it." So, like, there's just stealth and surgical strikes that, can happen here and there, and inshallah, the ripple effects will be big.
Inshallah.
A, a,
Alhamdulillah.
a major antidote to the despair of our moment and the impossible tasks that we're or fights we're trying to fight is saving one life is akin to saving the world. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you take that seriously with respect to Gaza or, the mission here for Asuli, I mean, that's a lifesaver, I think, and an anchor.
Yeah, no, truly, alhamdulillah. I mean, even I get messages, if you go to even my YouTube channel on the hijab video, like I've gotten a couple in the last month that were like, you've, I was going to become an atheist and now I found your video and now I'm actually going to go back and, look at Islam again, or, I mean, just messages of that, like people who are just like, oh my gosh, I was looking and then God sent me to you for so many different things, at Suli and, and the books. And I feel like everyone here, who cares, like anytime you share, like, oh, anything, right? You're so right about the ripple effect because, and we'll never know. I mean, that's the thing that's the most fascinating thing is it's like you have no idea how you're touching people and until you get one of these messages that it's like you've changed my life. And most messages that we get, it's like they say for every letter you get, 10 people would want to write. um, it's so gratifying. And for me it's like for this group, of friends who keep showing up just to be a source um, of confidence for you, right? Like it's like a reference point. It's like when you're alone, you just feel like maybe you're crazy, maybe there's something wrong with you. But now we actually have, a core group of people that no, critical thinking is okay. you know, it's okay to be human. It's okay to be normal. It's okay to have doubt. It's okay to question. It's okay to not look like everybody else or think like everybody else. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay not to be perfect. So many of these things that are like just move the meter a little bit and make you just feel okay, like you're on the right track and you're like keep going, and we have to be there for each other in that way, and I think it's so beautiful whenever I meet people like at the conference or, I talk to people and you feel that connection. Um, because it's like these are people who are open and they're kind and they're curious and they just feel stifled in normal Muslim spaces, and then but you start questioning why does the mainstream have to be so stifling? Um, and then you start feeling excited that okay, we can, even if we have a small space, even if we only have 15,000 followers on YouTube, vis-a-vis all these other places, at least it's a space that where you can breathe, where you can be yourself, where you can come and it's okay that you don't know everything or you don't have to be performative. You can just be yourself, and people will accept you and you're fine, and that's so important for us, especially now, when things are just so bad. You need a place where you feel like you can just be safe to be yourself. And I feel like that, to sum up what I think we try to do at Asuli is to make people feel safe wherever you are in your journey. We're all just trying to figure it out and we're all at different places on our journey. And, and I think we provide the tools to advance your journey so you can find that, you know, that road to thriving, inshallah. So, and for Tina to, I mean, it just means the world to me. Like she felt something when she met us enough to inspire her to create this beautiful film, and pour her time and energy and brilliance, into something because it became a labor of love. I mean, that's the ultimate compliment for us, you know. So yeah, thank you, Tina. I'm so grateful, and and
Thank
it's
you,
like all that
Grace.
you're doing for the world, right? I mean, anyone who is touched by your film, that's something that God will reward you for when it matters the most. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I think on that note, I want to thank Tina, Grace, Sheikh, and everyone who joined us today. This was really special, And please keep spreading the word about this documentary, host screenings. Kinema really makes it very easy. Don't be afraid, even if it's just your family or whatever, get the film out. Who knows what can happen? You're not responsible for the results, just your effort, I keep hearing. So inshallah, we'll take this film where it's supposed to go. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, can you
Thank
share this
you.
last comment? I'm a convert and was almost going to leave because of all the Wahhabi Islam ugliness, which made me think Islam is not for me. And that's when I found Usuli, and it changed everything for me. Thank you again for all of your care and effort. Thank you for sharing that. I mean,
That's
it's just
beautiful.
Thank
really
you, Priya. Thank you.